Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm incredibly excited to have on Maia Toll, herbalist, author, and all-around amazing person. Welcome to the show, Maia.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Maybe a few months ago at the time of recording this, your new memoir, Letting Magic In, which I actually just had the pleasure of listening to the audiobook for the past couple hours before we got on the show. So
How is
definitely,
it?
it's
I
great.
don't listen to audiobooks. I've never
Oh,
listened to it.
so you have no idea who did
Believe
the
me.
voiceover or anything? Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
I know she did the voiceover because I listened to like the auditions.
gotcha.
Yeah, it was actually it was very funny because I don't listen to audiobooks. So I called in my mom
Oh,
who listens to audiobooks all the time. I was like, can you help me with this? And it was interesting because there was one reader who was like very dramatic. And I was like, oh, that's good. And my mom's like, no, no.
okay.
She's like, the reader has to fade into the background. I'm like, okay, what do I know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I really liked the person that read the book, and man, I can't remember the word you used, but I was scrolling through your Instagram before the interview as well, and you used a word for someone who loves reading books in bed. Do you remember that word perchance?
oh my goodness.
Yeah,
You
that was
know,
probably a
it's,
year ago or something, but
I was about to say, we go through sometimes and we like look up cool words because,
yeah,
like feeding Instagram. What are you going to feed Instagram today?
totally.
Yeah, so that was probably something that we looked up and I quickly forgot after we found it.
Well, I bring that up because I would like to fancy myself as someone who reads books in bed, the bed, but really I love listening to audiobooks while I'm out on a walk. So I just went for like a 2 hour walk before I jumped on this call, and I was just had a great time listening to the audiobook. And yeah, I think it was fantastic. You might not know this either, but they use little sound effects throughout the book. Every time a new chapter starts, there's a little like a bell or something like that. It makes it a little more magical experience.
That's funny because we talked about all those things, but
Yeah.
I haven't experienced them. So um, when I was editing, like the final edits, you go through round after round after round of edits. When I was doing final edits on Letting Magic In, I was in a Meniere's episode. I have this ear problem called Meniere's disease, and it causes vertigo. And the words were literally like running off the edge of the computer screen
Oh
over
wow.
and over again. And I'm trying to edit. So I'm a little scared of this book,
Mm.
because I feel like that final edit, I wasn't my best self. So I haven't gone back at all. I'm terrified of my own book. I go, "Oh, what did I do in that final edit?" So every time someone tells me like thumbs up, I'm like, really?
Well, I want to say I read somewhere that you're I want to say maybe New York Times bestselling author or a bestselling author of some sort. No, you're not.
And no, so there are so many bestseller lists, and I
Yeah.
have been on multiple bestseller lists, but not
Okay.
the big, known
Gotcha.
ones. Y'all, if you have a favorite author, the way you get them on a bestseller list is you pre-order the book. Because what
Yeah.
happens then is all the pre-orders, they don't go through the day you pre-order. The day the book is released, all those pre-orders get registered at the same time. So if like everyone pre-orders, then the day the book is released, it's like 8,700 copies sold, New York Times bestseller. So yeah, you have a favorite author. That's the magic juice. That's how you do it.
Well, good tip. Yeah, I was just wondering if this was that book, but of course you've written a lot of books. I mean, so for those watching on YouTube, I'm holding up the memoir here, Letting Magic In, but we've also got a copy of the Illustrated Herbiary, and you've got just a bunch, I want to say like the Crystallary, if I'm getting that
Yeah,
right.
there's so the Illustrated Herbiary became a series based on the ancient medicine kingdom. So, for those of you who have studied traditional Chinese medicine, you know that the medicine kingdoms are animal, vegetable, mineral. So, herbiary is vegetable,
hmm
crystallary is mineral, and bestiary is animal. And then there's a book called The Wild Wisdom Companion that kind of shows you how to use all those around the wheel of the year.
Okay.
Um, So I had a really good time. Like, I'm trained as an herbalist, but I've also studied with a guy named Jeffrey Ewan, who is uh, many, many generations. Like, he's either 87th or 78th, or something like that, generation Taoist monk.
Oh, wow.
And so I I studied crystals with him and with one of his students. And this idea that we're using not just plants, but kind of the entire ecosystem of the earth
Mm,
can contribute to our healing. I love the idea of that kind of giant web of life and not life working together. So yeah, the three medicine kingdoms is something that has fascinated me for a very long time. And if you get into the older Taoist texts and Chinese medicine texts, they're using stones. They're putting them in water. So
mm,
like hematite has high iron, and so they would put that in water and let it sit for a couple days, and then the person would drink the water, which at a time when you couldn't take an iron pill, right,
right.
was a great substitute. So, when you start combining your medicines, like what happens if you make nettle tea and you put a chunk of hematite in it and you let it steep for 24 hours, right? We start to increase the nutrient density
Mm,
um, of our different medicines. And so, I love that. I love that a lot of these things that we consider magical today, like the way we look at crystals today is from a very magical point of view. But if you look at what those magical concepts are, and then you go back to the ancient texts, they line up.
mm,
It's kind of like instead of saying, oh, well, there's iron and hematite and we're getting it out into the water, there's about um, it being nourishing and fortifying and building up the system. Well, that's because it's building blood, right? So it's fascinating to me how all these things work together. And we use animal medicine all the time. If you have a hamburger bunch, you just ingested animal medicine, right? Which is why I think we need to be conscious where we're getting our meats from,
mm.
right? You're taking the energy of that meat. So um, while there are a lot of reasons to support local and organic, one of my personal reasons is I want a happy cow,
Amen.
right?
Absolutely.
If it's my medicine, if it's part of my like nutrient and how I'm nourishing myself, I want a happy cow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the word web, and I know there's a lot of like arachnid imagery throughout your the Letting Magic in book, and I was just kind of curious if you could kind of describe how the book is laid out in a web-like fashion.
Yeah. So I started writing this book, and honestly, I was just following the way my brain works. And one of the women in my writing group said, this is really like a web. It's kind of you're starting with things, and I could see a reader kind of being like, wait a sec, I don't understand how all these things connect. But if you kind of stick with it, right, and you start to spiral into the center of the web, you realize that all these things are connected.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's always been the way my brain works. I'm technically, I don't know. I was diagnosed a long time ago, and I don't know what the current politically correct term is. But when I was diagnosed, it was learning disabled,
Mm.
and my brain functions differently than other brains. Um, Sometimes that really works to my advantage, and sometimes not so much. But I am constantly looking for where things connect with each other.
Mm.
There's this kind of like patterning thing that my brain wants to do. It wants to find the pattern. It wants to understand how this connects with that, how that connects with the other thing. Um, and so, the book actually starts. This isn't a spoiler because it's on the first page,
Sure.
with a death. And I think it's really easy to go like, wait a sec, what does that have to do with going to Ireland to become an herbalist,
Right.
right? But for me, one of the most important things about being an herbalist truly, for me personally, more important than the individual plants and their names and their medicinal properties is this connection to the cycle of life, to the understanding that, things work through a cycle, and there's a birth point and a flowering point and a fruiting point and a death point, this point where things go back into the earth and are composted. And in working with clients for, a dozen years, I think that getting people to understand that cycle was the best medicine I could give them. Because we're in a culture where we're go, 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 go. We're flower, 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 flower. Oh, you can fruit a little bit, but, kind of keep popping, pop, 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 pop.
Mm.
And that doesn't leave room for the regenerative parts of the cycle, which are so important for healing. So getting people to understand that, getting people to understand that, like, death is okay,
Yeah.
right? I was watching. Did you watch The Great, about Catherine the Great? I forget what it was, Netflix or Apple or something.
No.
Um, and so it's based on the life of Catherine the Great. It's very spoofy. It's a bit over the top. If you're offended by over the top, don't watch it. But there's a doctor in there, and the patient says to the doctor, if we do this, are we going to be able to cure me? And he says, if doctors could cure everything, then people would think that they didn't have to die and they'd forget how important death is. And I was
Mm.
like, bingo.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
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 Do you think weaving this web of writing this book was healing and like cathartic for you?
Um, it's interesting because a lot of memoirists say that.
Hmm.
I think for me, I was a writer long before I was an herbalist. I was a kid who was writing stories. Um, and I was a very late reader. I didn't start reading until I was like 8 or 9. And I started reading because a teacher or a camp counselor started reading us a book and she didn't finish it before the end of the summer. And I needed to know what happened. I got in the car and was like, straight to the bookstore. My parents were like, who are you? Um, so I started reading fantasy. That was always the genre that I read. I read straight through high school. Like before it was popular, I was the geek in the corner, reading Asimov and Tolkien and things like that. Um, so books to me have always been stories,
Hmm.
fantasy stories. And at some point, I realized that I wasn't going to be a novelist.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that for
Yeah.
whatever reason, I didn't have that world creation thing going on in my brain, but I had this one story, had this story of being a person who sold their house and left their job and went to Ireland for a year to study with this like strange woman in the middle of the countryside. And so writing that book had been a driving force for many, many years. I wanted to be an author. Um, every book up until then was me teaching myself to write well enough to be able to write the memoir. Um, the Herbiary, the very first book, was actually started because I started the memoir in 2016, I think. And at the head of every chapter, I had a plant description. Um, and when I was workshopping the book, nobody, nobody liked the book, but everybody loved those plant descriptions.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, it's going to take me a long time more to get to the point where I can write this larger book, but these plant descriptions really seem to be grabbing people. And so that's what became the herbiary,
Hmm.
right? So like everything was training wheels for letting magic in.
Totally. Yeah, you mentioned being fascinated by who was it, Lloyd Alexander. I think that was the book that you were reading at
Yep.
the summer camp, and
At the
then
camp.
Ursula Le Guin, Tolkien, etc. And I had this coworker back in the day who was always reading those types of books as well. And I remember them telling me about their dreams, on a somewhat regular basis. And they were always so magical. And, there's like dragons and stuff like that, and just really amazing scenes that were painted in their mind as they were dreaming. And I was like, shit, I wish I had dreams like that. They're always usually like stressful or going over the previous day or my anxieties or stuff like that. And I still to this day don't have super magical dreams. Sometimes I will on occasion, but I'm just kind of curious, do you think consuming those types of books, filling your head with that type of magic is one way that we could practice and practice magic and bring it into our lives?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that was very strong for me from a young age was this idea that we are more powerful than we know we are. And not in the ways that the American dream tells us we're powerful. Not like you're going to go be president powerful, but you have an internal fortitude that comes from your mind and your intuition. And those books are what taught me that, more so than like any teacher or any human in my adult life. Those books showed me that there's potential for things we don't understand.
Hmm.
And I think that that's what actually got me into herbalism. I was going through an illness. I have a very mercurial constitution. Something is always going sideways. And my medical doctor finally said to me, "Look, Western medicine is not gonna help you with this."
Hmm.
And this was in the 90s. I mean, Western medicine was all there was, and I was a like Philadelphia suburban kid. Um, I didn't even know like I didn't even know a word like acupuncture or homeopathy. Like that wasn't even in my vocabulary to talk about or think about. So this doctor happened to be studying Chinese medicine, and she said, illnesses come in patterns. And the patterns that we look for in Western medicine are not the patterns that you're presenting with. But if you go to another system, they have different patterns.
Hmm.
And it was mind boggling, right? I was like, wait, there are different systems and there are different patterns, and we can take the same exact world, the same exact set of symptoms, and come around, 180 degrees and look at it from a different angle. And so that was really my introduction to herbalism. It was, in the stew pot with all these other modalities that I was like, whoa, we can start coming at things from different angles. And having the kind of brain that I did, I started to apply that to my whole life,
Hmm.
like, oh, wow, we don't have to just walk this direction. We can come around this way or that way. And I like the way that I often express it is you don't need a front door. A window works, a back door works. Like there are lots of ways into the house. And herbalism for me was one of the ways into the house,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh wow, there's this thing. And I wasn't living in a place, I was living in New York City. I wasn't living in a place where it was about green growing things. It was about dried herbs at the
Right.
the dusty health food store, because health food stores were not Whole Foods at that point. Um, and it was one of many things. It's been really interesting to listen to herbalists, like as I've kind of come up through this culture, and like why people became herbalists. And so many people are very plant based.
Yeah.
Like I'm good friends with Juliette Blankburn. She was
Hmm.
telling me about how like a plant spoke to her. She was like, "Oh shit, I guess like there's this whole plant thing going on, and I need to learn about it." Um, that was not my experience. I was kind of the hard headed rationalist that my poor teacher was just like, "Go sit with a plant." I'm like, why? It took me a very long time to find that connection. And I think the reason I ultimately did, back to your question about, those types of fantasy books, was I kind of went back to the models of those books. I was like, hold on a sec. How did you know, the herbalists in those books behave? How did the magicians, the alchemists? Oh, okay. Like, because I was getting these broad instructions, like go sit with a plant. I'm like, why? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned this herbalist. I want to say in the book you call her a witch that you studied with in Ireland. I'm just kind of curious how that came to be. Who is this person? What did you learn from her? And is that kind of like your, would you say your main herbalism background, or have you studied with others as well?
Yeah. So um, I've studied with a lot of people. So after Ireland, I was in Ireland for a year, and then I came back. I did Rosemary Gluckster's advanced herbal training, which at that point she was bringing in different people every weekend. Then I did 3 years with David Winston. Um, so I've put a lot of energy into, into this learning. Um, did way too many essential oil classes, so
That's good.
so yeah. Um, but I used to, but I don't actually reveal the name of my teacher in Ireland anymore because
Gotcha.
so many
Oh,
people desire that type of experience. And it's not fair to her. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
when it was just me telling my students who my teacher was, that felt clean and like I was discussing lineage. But now that there's a book out in the world and like
Right.
thousands of people have read it, it feels like I could put her in a uncomfortable situation or in a like a flood type situation that she doesn't need.
That's
Um,
fair.
but this was back in 2003, and I had just started studying shamanism and shamanistic practices. And so I was in a cycle of my life where things started falling apart. And I was living in upstate New York and very near Omega Institute. So I was in this like fabulous circle with instructors from the Omega Institute, and we would do journey work and things. And so I was just kind of like starting to tap into the mysticism side of my own psyche. And from that point of view, as I watch things in my real world start to unravel, um, I took a step back and thought, well, like my normal MO, the way that I've been taught to handle something like this is if something's unraveling, you put it back together. But from this point of view of um, living on a spiral and in the cycle of the seasons and being okay with death. What happens if you say it's okay if this particular life dies? What if you help? What if you actively work toward that death? And that attitude made something very different happen than what normally happens when, like normally the leaves would start to fall off the trees and I'd be gathering them up and gluing them back on. And how do I make it look the way it was before? And so instead of doing that, I was like, well, how do I dismantle this life and see what's next? And I got very into the dismantling. I put my house on the market, and I was teaching. I had a number of part-time teaching jobs. I started, wrapping those up and letting things go. And in the midst of this, I had this moment where I was like, oh, wait a second, girlfriend. Nature abhors a vacuum, and you are creating a humongous vacuum.
Hmm.
And anything, like, again, back to my fantasy book, you create like this big empty space, anything can come in. If you're not controlling the edges and the boundaries and saying, like, here's what's allowed in, then you're opening yourself up to any kind of energy. And so I was like, well, I need to start to at least plant the seeds of what's next. And I made this long list of things that I'd always been interested in. And it was a long list. It was like weaving and pottery and photography, and herbalism was on that list.
Mm.
So this was early internet. Google didn't exist. My search engine of choice was Alta Vista. Um, and I started, like just searching around for ways to study these different things. I figured property values where I lived had gone up so significantly that I probably had at least a year sabbatical that I could give myself on the profits of the house. And so I was like, well, What am I going to learn? What am I going to do with this time? And then one night I had a dream, and in the dream I was clearly shown Ireland,
Hmm.
and I was like, okay, what is this place? And I was told, this is where you're going to go for your initiation.
Hmm.
So my Alta Vista search started changing, and it was, Ireland plus pottery, Ireland plus weaving, Ireland plus herbalism. And my teacher kept showing up,
Hmm.
and she wanted to be identified as a witch. She called herself a witch. I mean, she was very well trained. She actually was trained by Rosemary in the States, and she had taught at the California school. So, she went through a system that most of us would recognize. Her Irish grandmother was also an herbalist. So she kind of had these two threads coming together. Um, and, you know, like for me, seeing this woman with her long hair sitting in front of the hearth, she had on like the cloak, and I mean, like she was doing it up, and I was a little like I don't know, that's for me. But she kept coming up, and then she had a 2 month class starting um, at a time that like perfectly fit my schedule for selling the house. So there was just a lot of serendipity going on. Um, so I signed up and I went to Ireland. And after 2 months, I begged her to keep me. And I ended up staying for about a year. And when I came back, I was a different person. I thought I'd go back to teaching elementary school, which is what I'd been doing before. But, um, I ended up opening an herb store, starting a clinical practice, teaching. There wasn't much at that point. The herb conferences, like the like Rosemary had her conferences going. I'm trying to think what else was going at that point. I mean, there just wasn't much out there. Having an herb store was weird. Um, and when I found herb stores, they often were either kind of like botanicas, like more, culturally geared towards like a Hispanic,
Oh,
um, you know, view of herbalism, or they were like health food stores slash herb stores that were like musty dusty and nobody ever went in them. Um, and I remember I was like, well, we should have all plant medicine here. And people thought it was so weird that I wanted to put herbs, essential oils, and flower essences in the same store. And I was like, but it's all the same stuff. It's all plants. And, face cream made from plants, that's plants too. And soap made from plants are plants too. And so like now every herb store is like that. But at the time it was considered bizarro. And, I had no idea whether it was going to succeed. I opened my first shop in a 7 by 10 foot space, about the size of a large closet. And we outgrew it in 9 months. And after a couple of years, my husband actually joined me in the business, and we opened a second store, and then it just kind of took off from there.
where was that based?
So that was Philadelphia. The first store
Oh,
was Philadelphia, and then the second store was also Philadelphia, in a place called Reading Terminal Market, which is like a Pike's Market
hmm.
in Seattle,
Oh yeah.
Pike's Place Market. Like it's like lots of stalls,
Yeah.
and they get incredible foot traffic. So that store really um, it allowed the business to thrive in a way that kind of the smaller store in a neighborhood of Philadelphia didn't. And then we moved to Asheville in 2014, I think,
Okay.
and opened a store down here.
Oh, is that still around?
So yeah, we still have the Asheville store, and we still
That's
have the
awesome.
Philadelphia store. We have one in each. Asheville oddly did not have an herb store, which
That is
it had
odd.
three herb schools. It had three
Yeah.
herb schools. It had like the Dallas Institute. I mean, it had Gaia Herbs. It had so much, but it didn't have an herb store.
Wow.
So when we came down, we opened an herb store, and like it immediately felt like it had been here forever.
Mm.
It was energetically already here.
Wow.
We just kind of physically built it on top of the energy imprint. Um, yeah.
I'll have to check that
So,
out next time I'm in the Asheville area. I had no idea.
oh yeah, yeah. You'll have to let me know next time you're in the Asheville area.
That'd be awesome. Well, I want to ask this, not just transitioning a little bit. Again, the book's called Letting Magic In. It's the memoir by Maia Toll, and I'm just kind of curious how you define what magic is.
For me, magic is that web,
Okay.
and like being able to feel the web and understand which strand to yank on.
Yeah.
It's what we do as herbalists, really.
Mm.
You're sitting with a human and you're looking at the web of them, the constellation of their symptomology and where they're well and where they're not well, where they're balanced and where they're imbalanced. And then you're kind of looking at the web of the natural world and you're overlaying the two, saying like,
Mm.
where do these two things come together? Um, I think that when you understand the web, when you understand those connections, you begin to be able to shift things, and you pull on certain threads, right,
Yeah.
to make things go in different directions. Um, and that can be used, you know, for good and for healing, and it can also be used in other ways. I think there's a master magician in the political game right now.
Mm.
I think we all know who he is. He can he can spin a web and say something, and we all go, "Is that true or not true?"
Interesting.
And 3 months later, half the country says, "Oh, that's true."
Yeah.
You're like, "Wow, wow." Right? So, for me, magic is stepping into the invisible and understanding that just because you can't tangibly touch something, it still exists,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's an energy or an attitude or a zeitgeist, you can tap into those things and you can use them to shift things. And I think, like, for me, what I'm often trying to shift is um, small things in the environment, small things in my personal environment, things in someone's health so that they can heal. But lots of things can be shifted once you have feel for it.
You were talking about nature abhorring a vacuum and being called to go study with that witch in Ireland. And it sounds like a lot of your journey has just been kind of following your heart, or I like to say like following the golden thread. And I'm just kind of curious, is there magic in pursuing what's calling you, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, again, back to that web and imagery,
Yeah.
when you get a feel for where you are on the web
Mm.
and where you want to go, it really does become a golden thread.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see the way from here to there. And if you can't see it with your eyes or your brain, like if you can't understand it, like you're saying, Mason, you can feel it with your heart. You feel that tug. Um, and you move that way. And the
Mm.
pattern shifts around you as you move that way. Yeah.
You also talk a lot about I want to say it was the time you moved to New York, back in the day, you were honing your sense of intuition. Do you think you can hone your sense of intuition by practicing this following your heart? If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like
Yeah.
the more I'm called to do something, and if I push it away, there's like this sense of sadness in me. But when I practice actually following through and pursuing these different projects I want to partake in, or this creative endeavor, I feel like I'm working that muscle. And I'm just kind of curious, do you think you can hone your sense of intuition by pursuing these creative callings, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just like training a puppy. If you keep telling it no, 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 then like you have an unhappy puppy who doesn't try anymore. But if you keep saying like, oh yeah, yeah, come on, you're doing it. Like if you say that to your intuition, then it it's allowed, it is allowed to express itself. It's allowed to bubble up. And,
Yeah.
I think that one of the pitfalls of intuition, and I don't know if you've encountered this, Mason, but I know for me, you know, there's that like pull at your heart. There's that kind of sense of I should be going that direction. And then there's this other thing that happens when your brain engages with the idea that you're intuitive and your brain gets like super excited about it. And your brain's like, ooh, intuitive. And it starts kind of grabbing things and calling them intuition when
Oh,
really what it
interesting.
is thought, you know? And so I think that that's the danger. Like just because you think something does not like that's not the same as an intuition. And I think that you have to learn to differentiate between the feeling of thinking and the feeling of intuition within your own body. They feel totally different for me. Like, a thought often comes in words. It's language based. It's clearly coming from upstairs. Whereas for me, an intuition is more of a full body experience.
Mm.
My brain is involved because my brain is part of my body. But, you know, it's more of a, I turned my head that way and I saw something. Wait, why did I turn my head that way? What, you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
that thing came into my line of sight because my body naturally turned toward it, as opposed to my brain being like, I'm looking for a sign. It is going to be on my left. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I think
I
that
do.
like there's a difference. I call it bully brain when our brains just get really chatty and loud and want to pull us off in certain directions. Um, it's I think that it's one of those things that's like the danger zone when you're first starting to work with your intuition
Mm.
is just that thought of like, oh wow, I'm intuitive. This is so cool. I can, change my life, make my life more magical, whatever it is you think you're doing with your intuition. Um, and then your brain's like off. And so I do think that you have to really just pay attention. What does intuition feel like in your body?
Mm.
The holistic experience of it. So that you can tell the difference between that and your, you know, our brains are very imaginative and creative and they want things to do. And if you tell them to focus on intuition, they will. They'll happily feed you all kinds of things and say that it's intuition.
Yeah, I want to say I heard on some interview you were on a podcast you posted about on your Instagram page. You were talking about one way to connect to divinity is through creativity. I was hoping you could expound upon that because it kind of feels like what we're talking about right here.
Yeah, yeah. So, for me, like divinity is not old man in the clouds. Divinity is it's this web, but this
Yeah,
is the metaphor that works for me, and I go back to it over and over again. It's that sense of I'm a part of something larger than me,
yeah.
right? I'm a part of something larger than me. Um, I like to kind of think about it from the inside out and the outside in. Your body's made of cells, right? So your little liver cell, it has
Mm.
a job. It's doing its job every day, going about its business. It knows its little liver friends. And it might not even have any awareness that there's a stomach or a kidney or a heart. It's in its own little neighborhood doing its own little thing. But it's very clear to us, the human, that liver cell is part of this larger organism called a human being. And so I think of us human beings as part of this like larger organism we can call Gaia or the Earth. And Gaia is a part of a larger organism called the solar system or the universe. Um, and there are probably systems that like we don't even have names for that we can't even understand or grok the same way that our little liver cell probably doesn't understand that it's part of a human being. So for me, this idea of divinity is allowing yourself to be a part of something larger than you, whether you can name it or not. You don't have to be able to name it. You don't have to call it anything. You don't even have to be able to describe it.
Mm.
But just having that knowledge, that sense of I am part of something larger than myself. And what can I create that serves that larger organism, you know? Um, that's that's part of how I find a sense of purpose. And,
Mm.
like I said, I have a very mercurial constitution. So especially when I feel like nothing is quite going well and I'm a little bit of a jumble and um, I need some motivation for being present. I go back to that. I have this time span where I can participate in this larger organism in a body. I don't think we fall out of the larger organism. I think we just lose the body part of it. Um, so what am I going to do? How am I going to support the organism? What am I going to create? And that re-energizes me, more so than thinking about like my husband's very human community focused, right?
Mm.
So he's thinking about like when his next Red Cross blood donation is, or volunteering at the polls, or whatever he's doing. Um, I like to think of this organism as much bigger than the human race. It's
Mm.
the animals and the plants and the crystals and the wind and the air. And so, like, how am I going to play with all that?
So much good stuff there. Do you think because back in the day, when I was in my early 20s, late teens, I was very gung ho about I'm going to change the world and I'm going to do all this stuff. And then I feel like as I got older, my creativity and my purpose started feeling like I'm just going to try to take care of my own life, create the things that I want to see in the world. And I'm just kind of curious how you look at that. Do you like the way your husband participates by donating a blood and whatnot? Do you think that uh, it'd be beneficial for us to really just follow our curiosity, follow our creativity, and just try to take care of our own little corner of the world, and that will bring like good to the whole organism or the whole universe or however you see it.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question because I think that obviously, if we look out at the world, it's a hot mess.
Yeah,
It's a, you know,
totally.
it's a hot mess, and it's really difficult to like shift an entire hot mess. And when I think about like how energy works, if I am energetically intending something, if I'm kind of like pulling on these threads, and I'm the only person pulling on that thread, well, then that thread is going to move, right? But when you get a whole host of people pulling the other direction with their energy and intention,
Hmm,
well, then I'm not going to be able to move that thread.
right.
So, I I at this point feel like we're all going to do this in different ways. Andrew's going to give blood to the Red Cross. I'm going to feel slightly guilty that I'm not. And I'm going to do something else. I'm going to write a blog post. I'm going to write a book, you know, and that's going to send energy out in a different way. So I've been thinking a lot. Do you remember there was an old book called Love Languages? Do you remember
Oh
that
yeah,
book?
I've heard of
Yeah,
that one. Yeah,
yeah,
the
you
five
know,
love languages or something.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
And I haven't even read it. I read like synopsises of it,
yeah.
but like the concept of a love language and all of us having a different way that we express our love, and allowing ourselves to express the way we express,
Hmm.
right? So maybe you're a person who wants to work meta and is like marching on Washington or getting on airplanes and doing Doctors Without Borders or something like that. And maybe you're a person who's gonna sit home and write poetry. And that poetry is going to find its way into a zine that's going to find its way into the hand of some 17-year-old who's about to commit suicide in Ethiopia.
Hmm.
And they're not going to because of your poem. You know, we're all moving out into the world in different ways. And I think that if you put the intention behind it of doing your best work in the world, doing your most hopeful work in the world, and then you just let it go. Like
Yeah.
we can't control where it goes. Just like Andrew can't control where his blood goes. I don't know who's going to get his blood, and neither does he. but he's willing to put it out there. And so for me, like that's what the book's about,
Yeah.
right? It's this like there's an energy I want to share with the world. I'm going to put it on paper. I'm going to send it out into the world. And hopefully someone's going to find that at a moment when it can help them in some way that I will never understand.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, who are you hoping gets their hands on this book? And you kind of answered it right there, but yeah, I mean, I guess if you could expound upon that, who are you writing this book for? Who do you hope reads it? And yeah,
Yeah, this book to me is for anyone who's at the beginning of a mystical or healing journey.
Hmm.
For anyone who's seeking something in the world and is just confused how to get from point A to point B, that kind of like, I know there's something out there that is more than this.
Yeah,
Um, but I have no idea how to move from point A to point B. And my hope with this book, my hope with all my books, is to lay down some breadcrumbs. You know, this is not a prescriptive book. This does not say, now go do this.
yeah,
But we all learn by example, right? And by seeing somebody else do something, you go, oh, wait, that's possible. Or, oh, wait, I had no idea you could think about things that way. And so for me, letting magic in is it's a breadcrumb trail. And it's for anyone who's ready to shift their life, but is feeling either lost or alone or scared of themselves, because I had some moments where I was really scared of myself, like, whoa, what is this? What is this thing that my mind and body are doing? This shift in paradigm um, was really scary. I was not the person I had been before, and I wasn't a person that like my parents recognized. Um, and we all go through those moments, right, where we kind of crack out of the eggshell that we've been living in. Um, but we very rarely have someone to hold our hand, you know. If we're lucky, you have a good friend or a therapist or someone to walk along with you. But a lot of times we just muck around by ourselves until we get to the other side. And then we look back and go, oh, okay, I see what that was now. So, this is me reaching my hand back from the other side and saying, like, okay, come on, you can do this. And I'm going to show you how messy it is. So you know that when you're messy, you're okay. You've got this.
yeah, I love that. And speaking of audiobooks, I'm actually listening to an audiobook right now about how to become a better speaker. It's written by a person who has studied a lot of TED Talks. It's a really great book. And I know, and it's really great book, and a lot of what I'm reading or listening to right now, what he's talking about is how effective storytelling is compared to just like raw data. And yeah, the book doesn't, from what I've listened to so far, doesn't have, like you said, a lot of prescriptive things in it, but it's all story based. So it's going to be incredibly helpful for someone like you said who's just starting out on their journey. So yeah, I love that. And we all learn through stories. Humans are story driven. So yeah, I also have to say I wish more herbalists would write memoirs, because I don't know, I've always just been fascinated with herbalists as people, and there's plenty of herbals out there, but I love hearing about the stories of the herbalists out there. So it was great to get to know you more through these stories.
Well, thank you. The person we have to really encourage all of us to write a memoir is Rosemary, because she's
That's right.
talked to me about some of her stories and ideas, like from the point of view of writing a book.
Yeah.
I want that book. Rosemary, if you're listening, get writing.
I've heard she listens to the show on occasion. So yeah, Rosemary, we need a memoir from you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're all waiting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I also would like to talk a little bit about, so this is going to be released in a couple months. You've got coming up in August something called Night School for Young Mystics. Would you like to share more about that?
Yeah, I wish I had a mock-up of the cover because it's gorgeous.
All of your
But
books and everything you do, Maya, is gorgeous. So I don't know if you keep
thank
working with the
you.
same artist or not, but yeah, it's always awesome, beautiful. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I have different artists. Like I've been incredibly lucky. I've been incredibly lucky. In the publishing world, people always talk about like getting a good cover, and I have gotten many good covers. So in between the herbiary crystallary book and Letting Magic In, I wrote a book called The Night School,
Mm.
which is much more prescriptive. It's for the one that's already published is for adults, and it's pretty much like mysticism made easy because so many books on mysticism are so dry and impossible to get to. So this book is very, very readable. I created a character. He's kind of like the wacky professor who walks you through the lessons, and everything is very short, like 2 or 3 pages, so that it's like, just read a little bite, take your time, digest it before you go on to the next. And in my mind, it was always like the Magic School Bus. Do you remember the Magic School Bus?
I love that. Yeah, cartoon from the
Yeah.
early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So in my head, B. Marlowe, who's the teacher at the night school, was Lily Tomlin doing the Magic School Bus. And I kept talking about that with my publisher. I kept being like, it's just like the Magic School Bus. And they're like, uh-huh, Maya, uh-huh. But it must have sunk in because they came to me and they said, do you want to do a version for kids? And I was like, hell yes. So it's really fun because it's just lightened down to kid level, uh, very much based on like the trip idea that the Magic School Bus, we're going somewhere, we're learning something there. And it parallels the adult book. So it'd be really easy for an adult to be reading the adult book and a kid to be reading the kid book and, be able to have that family discussion. So I'm really excited about this one. And I hope that it gets made into a cartoon. That is my intention, putting that out in the world.
Very cool. And do you have a release date for you? You said August?
August 6th.
Awesome.
August 6th.
Well, we
Yeah.
will stay tuned for that. And I'll be sure to get a link for more information, include that in the podcast show notes, the YouTube description, all the above. So awesome. Well, a couple more questions for you, Maya. You mentioned in Letting Magic In your annual tarot practice during your birthday. And I was just hoping you could kind of, for those uninitiated, if you could kind of inspire us or teach us how we could get into tarot, if I'm saying the word correctly. I've heard it pronounced a few different ways.
Yeah, you are
Tarot.
saying the word you
Okay.
are saying the word correctly, tarot. Um, so, at the time that the book was like the time of my life the book was written about, I was using tarot cards. At this point, I use oracle cards a
Oh,
lot. So the difference is tarot is the system. It's actually based off of your regular card deck. So it has suits, just like a card deck does. The suits in tarot are based on the 4 elements: earth, air, water, fire, instead of clubs, hearts, jacks, well, not jacks, clubs, hearts, diamonds. I'm missing one spade.
spades.
Um, so so tarot is a system, and it's complex. It's layered. You're looking at the numerology of the number, kind of married with um, the earth, air, water, fire element, um, and then the position in your spread and things like that. So it takes some doing. It's like learning astrology. It's multi-layered. Oracle cards are way easier. They're what my decks are that go with the herbiary, bestiary, and crystallary. Each card just has one meaning. It's a standalone. You don't have to understand the whole system in order to lay down some cards. So I've moved towards oracle cards. I just I find them kind of quick and easy.
Sure.
And I love on occasions like birthdays. I have to say, as I've gotten older, I've gotten to the point where sometimes I literally forget it's my birthday. So I'm not as birthday
I feel
oriented
you.
as I used to be. Yeah, I was like, birthday? Um, but especially around the winter solstice, because I feel like, the sun dies and then is reborn. And so what are we gonna bring into this new year? I'll lay down some cards. And a lot of times what I do with the oracle cards is I'll just do a 3 card spread. I'll do past, present, future, and just lay down a card for each. Sometimes I'll do what I call a crossing, which is I lay down one card that represents who I am right now or what I'm going through right now, and then what's crossing me,
Mm.
what is keeping me from being able to move forward. So those are the 2 spreads that I use the most. Um, Sometimes when I want to get fancy, I created a spread for one of the books, kind of based on the cycle of the season. So, you start with what's in seed, what's in flower, what's in fruit, and what's dying, and and go round that way. Um, the way that I think about the cards is not that they are mystically, magically reaching into the future and giving you, the TV show of your life to come. Instead, I think of the cards as doorways into the collective unconscious, doorways into metaphors and archetypes that we all work with throughout our lives. And so if you're having a problem and you are standing at the front of the house trying to open the front door, go back to that metaphor, and the door is not opening and you're frustrated and you don't know how to get through, and you pull a card and it directs you to a back window, right? It says, why don't you look at it this way? How about stop staring at it, from the point of view you've had, and instead come around and think of it this way. And even when I pull cards that I'm just like, what's this? Usually within 24 hours, my brain kind of gestates with it, and I start to see how I can take the message of that card, overlay it on my situation, and start to think about my situation differently so that I can shift the outcome.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the herbiary, crystallary, and bestiary all have their own tarot cards and or oracle cards, and I don't have it in the book anymore. I know Amanda has them hiding somewhere upstairs, but but yeah,
Yeah, there are cards in the back of the book, and then I also
yeah,
I'm
pull them
looking at my
out.
bookshelf and going, wait,
Yeah.
where are they? Here they are. So they also did just deck. So for people who
Oh,
like deck,
awesome.
um, yeah, and these are
Beautiful.
bigger than the ones in the back of
Oh,
the. So like that's
nice.
Apple.
They're so
Yeah,
pretty.
yeah, they're really lovely. I just got so lucky, you know.
Totally. Ladies' mantle.
Lady's Mantle, there's Willow.
That's
So
so cool. Are those
yeah,
all
and I
available on
found
your
out.
website or?
Well, I don't sell from my website, but if you go to my website, you can, see the names of everything, and then they're available wherever books are sold. The Herbiary has actually sold over 100,000 copies at this point.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
Congrats.
it's like it's really out in the world.
Yeah.
Um, so it's it's weird. They don't announce these things to you. I found out kind of by accident. Like, wait, we've sold 130,000 copies.
Uh,
130,000 people are looking at herbs that way. I mean, that's amazing.
It is. Yeah, I've seen it at lots of different just random bookstores, not even like herb shops or anything like that. They're all over, as you say.
Yeah, yeah. You can Barnes and Noble, Amazon, wherever you buy your book.
Awesome. Well, very cool. This has been a lot of fun, Maya.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, did you have any closing words for the audience? Any advice you'd like to impart on, say, those listening, budding herbalists, whatnot?
Oh, wow. That's a big topic for the end of an hour.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think more than anything else, just keep listening to your heart, and like don't don't stay in things that don't feel right. Move towards the things that make you feel aligned with yourself.
Love that. Yeah, listen to your heart
Yeah.
and listen to the audiobook. Uh, letting magic in, or purchase the physical copy so you could read it in bed. But yeah, thank you once again, Maya, for joining us on the show. Let's say your website's maiatoll.com, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it's MaiaToll.com. And I have a newsletter that you can sign up
That's
for
right.
there. And I actually publish fairly often. So
Yeah.
there's also, this is kind of like a strange aside, because I have this thing called Meniere's disease, which is an inner ear condition. Um, I've been gathering from all my herbalist and other alternative friends information on how to work with this. And there's a surprising number of people out there with
Wow.
either this condition or COVID ear, which is like as a result of COVID, they've ended up with something that symptomatically is very much like Meniere's. So I've been compiling all that and have posts on the web on the newsletter website. So, if you're a person that's either dealing with this yourself, or if you have clients or people you're working with, and you want to kind of, it's not advice as in I did this and you go do this. It's compilations of advice from so many brilliant people.
Good to know. And for the listener, currently your newsletter is called Unkempt. I don't know if you want to share with what it's going to be transitioning to, or where people could sign up and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. So you will always be able to sign up on the Maia Toll website. That's the easy thing. Right now, my newsletter's on Substack, and for the foreseeable future, it will stay there. It's been called Unkempt because I was feeling very uncommitted when I started it. I was not sure I was going to continue. I didn't want any pressure. And one of the things I've realized about myself is I like commitment. I like being devoted to something, and I'm very devoted to my writing. And so I'm going to be changing the name of it in the next couple of months, probably. By the time you hear this,
Yep.
it will be changed to Tell Me Something True. And it's just maiatoll.com/Substack, or Substack /Maia Toll, something like that. That won't change, but the name you see for the title of the newsletter will be shifting.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure we have the correct URL in the podcast show notes and so on. So awesome, Maya. Well, thank you once again for joining us on the Herbalist Hour. Thanks, y'all, for listening. Big thanks to Amanda for editing, and we will see y'all in the next episode. Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbrally.com/schoolhouse, enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.